The scorching summer heat in Rome was unbearable, with temperatures soaring above 40 degrees Celsius. Tourists from around the world wilted under the blazing sun as they visited the famous Trevi Fountain. One of Italy's most treasured historical landmarks, the ancient marble structure provided little shade, and the sound of cascading water only made everyone more aware of their desperate need to cool down. Among the crowd of sweating visitors was Bradley Morrison, a 28-year-old American influencer who had built his social media empire on pranks and outrageous stunts. With over 3 million followers on various platforms, Bradley made his living by creating viral content that often involved embarrassing or annoying innocent people. His motto was anything for the views, and he had no qualms about causing trouble if it meant getting clicks and likes. Bradley traveled the world with his camera crew, consisting of his girlfriend Emma, who filmed everything, and his best friend Jake, who handled the technical equipment. They had already caused minor incidents in Paris, London, and Barcelona on this European tour, always managing to avoid serious consequences by claiming it was just entertainment. Standing guard at the fountain was Alessandro Rossi, a 45-year-old security officer who had protected the historic site for over 15 years. Alessandro was a quiet, dignified man who took immense pride in preserving Italy's cultural heritage. He spoke 5 languages fluently and often helped confused tourists find their way around the Eternal City. His colleagues respected him for his professionalism, and regular visitors had grown fond of his gentle demeanor and helpful nature. What most people didn't know about Alessandro was his extraordinary background. Before becoming a security guard, he had served 20 years in the Italian Special Forces, participating in some of the most dangerous military operations in Africa and the Middle East. He had been decorated multiple times for bravery and had led rescue missions that saved hundreds of civilian lives in war zones. Alessandro had retired from military service after a mission in Somalia, where he sustained injuries saving a group of aid workers from terrorists. The physical wounds had healed, but the emotional toll of 2 decades of warfare had left him seeking peace and tranquility. The job at Trevi Fountain provided exactly what he needed, a chance to serve the public in a calm, positive environment while protecting something beautiful instead of engaging in violence. The fountain area was particularly crowded that afternoon, with tour groups from Japan, Germany, and America all converging at the same time. Children splashed their hands in the cool water while their parents took photos, and street vendors sold overpriced cold drinks to desperate tourists. Alessandro maintained his position near the fountain's edge, occasionally reminding visitors about the rules: no climbing on the statues, no littering, and absolutely no swimming or excessive splashing that could damage the ancient marble. His presence was gentle but authoritative, and most tourists respected his quiet requests. Bradley had been filming various pranks throughout Rome all day, and his content wasn't performing as well as usual on social media. His audience was getting bored with simple tourist tricks, and he needed something more dramatic to maintain his follower count and sponsorship deals. "Guys, we need something bigger," Bradley told his crew as they filmed near the fountain. "The Italy videos are getting weak engagement. I need something that'll really blow up online." Emma adjusted her camera equipment and scanned the crowd for potential targets. "What about that security guard? He looks pretty serious. It might be funny to mess with him a bit." Jake nodded enthusiastically. "Yeah, these European guards are usually uptight about everything. Could be hilarious to see him lose his cool on camera." Bradley studied Alessandro carefully, noting the guard's professional demeanor and respectful interactions with tourists. In Bradley's twisted logic, the more respectable and dignified a person appeared, the funnier it would be to humiliate them for internet entertainment. "Perfect target," Bradley grinned maliciously. "Old guy probably takes his job way too seriously. This could be the viral moment we need." Alessandro had no idea that he was being watched and evaluated as potential entertainment content. He continued his duties, helping an elderly German couple understand the fountain's history and gently directing some teenagers away from the restricted areas. Bradley spent several minutes planning his approach, studying Alessandro's patrol patterns and positioning himself for maximum impact. His years of creating viral content had taught him that timing and dramatic effect were everything. He needed the perfect moment when the guard was distracted and the maximum number of people would witness the incident. "Emma, make sure you get his face clearly when I do this," Bradley instructed quietly. "We want to capture every second of his reaction. Jake, have the backup camera ready in case security tries to confiscate the main footage." The plan was simple but cruel. Bradley would pretend to accidentally slip while taking a selfie near the fountain, then accidentally splash a large amount of water directly at Alessandro. The incident would be filmed from multiple angles, and Bradley would later edit it to make it look even more dramatic for his social media channels. Alessandro was helping a young Italian mother take photos of her children when Bradley made his move. The security guard was kneeling down to get on the children's eye level, explaining in simple Italian how Neptune, the fountain's central figure, controlled the seas. "Guarda, bambini," Alessandro said gently, pointing to the magnificent sculpture Neptune il Dio del Mare. "Molto potente e molto bello, Sith." The children listened with wide eyes, fascinated by both the story and Alessandro's patient way of explaining it. Their mother smiled gratefully, appreciating how the guard took time to educate her children rather than simply moving them along. This was the moment Bradley chose to strike. With Emma filming and Jake recording backup footage, Bradley positioned himself near the fountain's edge with a large bottle of water he had purchased from a vendor. He pretended to take a selfie while actually preparing to dump the entire bottle on the unsuspecting guard. "Here we go," Bradley whispered to his camera crew. "This is going to be epic." With theatrical flourish, Bradley pretended to lose his balance and stumbled toward Alessandro, simultaneously emptying the large water bottle directly over the guard's head and upper body. The cold water soaked through Alessandro's uniform, stripping from his hair and running down his face. The crowd around the fountain gasped in shock. The Italian children started crying, frightened by the sudden commotion. Their mother gathered them protectively, glaring at Bradley with obvious disgust. Bradley immediately began laughing loudly and performing for the cameras. "Oh my God, so sorry, dude. Total accident. Did you guys get that on film? That was hilarious." Emma and Jake dutifully recorded Bradley's fake apology and exaggerated reactions. Knowing their audience would eat up the innocent tourist act while enjoying the guard's humiliation, Alessandro stood slowly, water still dripping from his soaked uniform. For a moment, his face showed no expression at all, a completely blank mask that those familiar with military personnel would recognize as the calm before a devastating storm. Other tourists began pulling out their phones, sensing that something significant was about to happen. Some recorded the incident, while others stepped back, instinctively feeling the tension building in the air. Bradley continued his performance, hamming it up for the cameras. "Seriously? Total accident, man. You should probably get a towel or something. Maybe your supervisor can get you some dry clothes." The young American was so focused on entertaining his audience that he completely missed the subtle changes in Alessandro's posture and demeanor. Years of combat experience had taught the former Special Forces officer to assess threats quickly and respond with calculated precision, "Sir," Alessandro said quietly, his accented English perfectly controlled. "I believe you intended to do that." Bradley laughed even louder, playing up the innocent tourist routine. "What? No way, man. Just clumsy American tourist, you know? These Italian fountains are super slippery." But Alessandro's trained eye had already analyzed the incident from multiple angles. The way Bradley had positioned himself, the timing of the accident, the presence of multiple cameras, and most importantly, the complete lack of any actual attempt to avoid spilling the water, everything indicated a deliberate, premeditated act. The crowd was growing larger as word spread through the tourist groups that something interesting was happening at the fountain. Street vendors stopped their sales pitches to watch, and tour guides paused their historical explanations to see what the commotion was about. Alessandro took a step closer to Bradley, his military bearing becoming more apparent with each movement. The playful, gentle demeanor that tourists knew was being replaced by something far more serious and commanding. "Young man," Alessandro said, his voice carrying a new edge of authority that made several tourists step back instinctively. I have been observing tourists for 15 years. I know the difference between an accident and a deliberate act. Bradley's confident smirk faltered slightly, but he maintained his act for the cameras. Dude, you're being totally paranoid. Why would I waste perfectly good water on purpose? It's like €5 a bottle in this tourist trap. The insult to Rome and its historic fountain sparked murmurs of anger from Italian tourists in the crowd. Calling the Trevi Fountain a tourist trap was deeply offensive to locals who considered it a sacred part of their cultural heritage. Alessandro's eyes narrowed as he processed not just the physical assault, but the disrespect shown to the monument he had dedicated his life to protecting. In that moment, his military training and his love for Italian culture merged into a focused determination to teach this arrogant tourist. It's a lesson he would never forget. Sir, you were filming this incident, Alessandro observed, pointing to Emma's obvious camera setup. Why would you film an accident unless you planned it? Bradley felt the first flutter of nervousness, but pushed forward with his routine. His social media career depended on never backing down from confrontations. His audience expected him to dominate every situation. We film everything, man. It's called vacation memories. Maybe they don't have cameras where you come from, but Americans like to document our travels. The condescending tone and implied suggestion that Italy was technologically backward infuriated more Italian observers. Several locals began speaking angrily in rapid Italian, calling Bradley stupido Americano and worse insults. Alessandro raised his hand slightly, and amazingly, the crowd fell silent. Even without knowing his background, people instinctively recognized the gesture of someone accustomed to commanding respect and obedience. Mr. American tourist, Alessandro said, with deliberate emphasis. You have assaulted a security officer, damaged government property with your reckless behavior, shown disrespect to Italian culture, and created a public disturbance. These are serious offenses under Italian law. Bradley laughed nervously, still trying to maintain his casual attitude for the cameras. Come on, Grandpa. You're taking this way too seriously. It's just water. You'll dry off in like 10 minutes in this heat. The word Grandpa was a critical mistake. Alessandro was proud of his physical condition and military bearing, despite being in his mid-40s. More importantly, the dismissive attitude showed a complete lack of respect that triggered Alessandro's protective instincts. I see. Alessandro nodded slowly. You believe that age and nationality give you the right to humiliate working people for your entertainment. Emma continued filming, sensing that the confrontation was building to something dramatic. Jake adjusted his equipment to capture everything in high definition. Thinking this footage would generate millions of views once they posted it online, Alessandro pulled out a small radio from his belt and spoke rapidly in Italian to someone on the other end. Within moments, additional security personnel began moving through the crowd toward their location. Whoa, whoa, Bradley said, his nervousness increasing as he saw uniformed officers approaching. You're calling backup over some spilled water? That's seriously overkill, don't you think? Sir Alessandro replied formally, You have committed multiple violations of Italian law. My colleagues are coming to ensure this situation is handled properly according to legal procedures. Bradley's social media experience had taught him that. Security guards usually backed down when confronted aggressively. Most were minimum wage employees who avoided confrontations to keep their jobs. He expected Alessandro to follow the same pattern. Look, buddy, Bradley said, stepping closer to Alessandro in an attempt to intimidate him. I've got 3 million followers online. One bad review from me could seriously hurt tourism to this place. Maybe we should just forget this whole thing happened. But Alessandro didn't back down an inch. Instead, he stood straighter, his military posture becoming unmistakable to anyone who had ever served in armed forces. 3 million followers, Alessandro repeated thoughtfully. That means 3 million people will witness what happens when someone disrespects Italian culture and assaults our security personnel. The crowd had grown to over 100 people. With tourists from multiple countries watching the confrontation unfold, many were now recording with their phones, creating multiple angles of documentation that would soon spread across social media platforms worldwide. The additional security officers arrived, along with 2 Italian police officers who had been patrolling nearby. Alessandro spoke to them rapidly in Italian, explaining the situation while gesturing toward Bradley and the camera equipment. Officer Marco Benedetti, a veteran policeman who had worked with Alessandro for years, listened carefully to the report. He knew Alessandro's background and had tremendous respect for the former Special Forces soldier. If Alessandro said someone had committed assault, Marco believed it completely. Signore Officer Benedetti addressed Bradley in accented English. You are accused of assaulting a security officer and disturbing the peace at a protected cultural site. Please provide your identification documents. Bradley's confidence finally began to crack as he realized this wasn't going to be the easy victory he had expected. Officer, this is ridiculous. Your security guard is completely overreacting to an obvious accident. I'm an American citizen, and I have rights. Yes, you have rights, Officer Benedetti agreed. You have the right to remain silent, the right to contact your embassy, and the right to legal representation. But you also have obligations to respect Italian law while visiting our country. Emma and Jake continued filming, but they were now documenting their friend's potential arrest rather than a triumphant prank. The mood of their European adventure had shifted dramatically. Alessandro stepped forward and addressed the crowd in multiple languages. First Italian, then English, followed by German and French. His linguistic skills amazed the international tourists, who hadn't expected such sophistication from a fountain security guard. Ladies and gentlemen, Alessandro announced, this individual has deliberately assaulted me while filming for social media content. He has shown disrespect to our cultural heritage and treated working people as entertainment for his online audience. The crowd's reaction was immediate and overwhelmingly negative toward Bradley. Tourists who had initially been neutral observers now looked at him with disgust and disapproval. A German tourist in his 60s stepped forward. Young man, what you did was shameful. This guard was helping children learn about history when you attacked him for your stupid video. An elderly Italian woman added her voice in broken English. Vergogna. Shame. You treat our beautiful fountain like playground for idiots. Bradley felt the crowd's hostility closing in around him. His usual tactic of playing the victim wasn't working, because too many people had witnessed his deliberate actions and subsequent arrogant behavior. This is insane, Bradley protested. You're all acting like I committed murder. It was just water. Alessandro had been waiting for exactly this response. His military training had taught him to let adversaries expose their true character before delivering decisive action. Just water, Alessandro repeated slowly. Sir, may I ask what you do for work in America? Bradley, confused by the question, answered automatically. I'm a social media influencer. I create content for online platforms. I see. And if someone came to your workplace and deliberately poured water on you while filming for their entertainment, how would you feel? That's totally different, Bradley stammered. My work is different. It's not the same thing at all. Why is it different? Alessandro pressed. Because you believe your entertainment is more important than other people's dignity? Because you think working people exist for your amusement? The philosophical challenge caught Bradley completely off guard. His usual responses of jokes and deflection weren't working against Alessandro's calm, logical approach. Officer Benedetti had been watching the exchange with growing respect for Alessandro's his handling of the situation. Rather than responding with anger or violence, the security guard was systematically dismantling the American's justifications while maintaining complete professionalism. Mr. Morrison, the officer said. Having checked Bradley's passport, you have 2 choices. You can apologize publicly to this officer and compensate him for the assault, or you can be arrested and processed through the Italian legal system. Bradley looked around at the hostile crowd, the multiple cameras recording his humiliation and the stern faces of Italian law enforcement. For the first time in his social media career, he was completely outmatched and facing real consequences for his actions. How much compensation are we talking about? He asked weakly, his earlier bravado completely gone. Alessandro spoke quietly to Officer Benedetti in Italian, then turned back to Bradley with an expression that revealed nothing about his thoughts. Mr. Morrison, the compensation is not about money. It is about respect and understanding. Alessandro continued, his voice carrying the weight of authority that came from decades of leadership experience. Mr. Morrison, you have shown the world through your cameras that Americans believe they can travel anywhere and treat local people however they choose. Is this the message you want your 3 million followers to receive? Bradley felt trapped. Every word he had spoken, every arrogant gesture he had made, was captured on multiple cameras and would soon be spreading across the internet. But instead of the viral triumph he had planned, he was becoming the villain in his own story. Look, maybe I was wrong, Bradley admitted reluctantly. But everyone makes mistakes, right? Can't we just move on? Mistakes, Alessandro repeated thoughtfully. Sir, I have made many mistakes in my life. Real mistakes with serious consequences. But what you did was not a mistake. It was a deliberate choice to humiliate someone for entertainment. Officer Benedetti stepped closer to Bradley. Signore Morrison, you must decide now. Public apology and community service, or arrest and deportation proceedings. The word deportation hit Bradley like a physical blow. Being banned from European travel would destroy his social media career, which depended on exotic locations and international content. What kind of community service? Bradley asked desperately. Alessandro exchanged glances with Officer Benedetti, then addressed the crowd that had gathered to watch the confrontation. Ladies and gentlemen, Alessandro announced, this young man will now demonstrate proper respect for our cultural heritage by cleaning the Trevi Fountain area for the remainder of the day. Under security supervision, the crowd murmured approval. The punishment fit the crime perfectly. The tourist who had treated the fountain with disrespect would now care for it properly. And Alessandro continued, he will create a social media post for his 3 million followers, explaining why respect for local cultures and working people is important. When traveling, Bradley's face went red with embarrassment. The idea of admitting his mistake to his entire online audience was humiliating. But the alternative of arrest and deportation was worse. Fine, Bradley said through gritted teeth. I'll do your community service and make the stupid apology video. Not stupid, Alessandro corrected firmly. Sincere. Your followers deserve honesty, not performance. For the next 4 hours, Bradley found himself equipped with cleaning supplies, picking up trash around the fountain area, while Alessandro supervised. The former Special Forces officer used the time to educate Bradley about the fountain's history, Roman culture, and the importance of treating all workers with dignity. This fountain, Alessandro explained as Bradley scrubbed graffiti from marble steps, was completed in 1762. Millions of people have found joy and beauty here for over 250 years. When you disrespect this place, you disrespect centuries of human artistry and thousands of people who maintain. Bradley began to understand the magnitude of his casual arrogance. He had treated a World Heritage Site like a backdrop for his personal entertainment, never considering its cultural significance or the people dedicated to preserving it. As the day progressed, something unexpected happened. Tourists began approaching Alessandro to thank him for standing up to disrespectful behavior. Several offered to hire him as a private tour guide. Impressed by his knowledge and professional demeanor, an elderly American veteran recognized Alessandro's military bearing and struck up a conversation in English. Son, I can tell you've served. What branch? Italian Special Forces, Alessandro replied modestly. 20 years, mostly in Africa and the Middle East. The American veteran's eyes widened with respect. Special Forces doesn't mess around. That punk kid had no idea who he was dealing with. Word of Alessandro's background began spreading through the crowd. Tourists who had witnessed the incident started sharing the story on social media, but from a very different perspective than Bradley had planned. Instead of funny, American pranks Italian guard, the narrative became decorated. War veteran shows patience with disrespectful. Tourist and former Special Forces soldier teaches respect through dignity. By evening, Bradley was exhausted, humbled, and fundamentally changed by the experience. As he filmed his apology video for social media, his words carried genuine remorse rather than his usual performative attitude. "I want to apologize to Alessandro Rossi, a security guard at the Trevi Fountain who I treated disrespectfully today," Bradley said to his camera. "I thought it would be funny to splash water on him for a video, but I learned that he's a decorated military veteran who deserves respect, not harassment. I was wrong, and I'm sorry." The apology video that Bradley posted that evening went viral, but not in the way he had expected. Instead of his usual audience of prank enthusiasts, the video attracted millions of viewers who praised his willingness to admit his mistake and learn from it. Comments poured in from around the world. "Finally, an influencer who takes responsibility for their actions. This guard sounds amazing. I want to visit Rome just to meet him. Respect to both of them, the guard for his patience and the tourist for learning to be." Alessandro's story began spreading across international media. News outlets picked up the tale of the decorated war veteran who had chosen to work quietly protecting cultural heritage and who had responded to assault with education rather than retaliation. Within a week, the Rome Tourism Board had offered Alessandro a position as chief cultural ambassador. With a significant salary increase and the opportunity to share his knowledge with visitors from around the world, Alessandro accepted. Seeing it as a chance to serve his country in a new way, Bradley's social media career took an unexpected turn as well. His audience began requesting more educational content and fewer harmful pranks. The young American discovered that people were hungry for authentic travel experiences and cultural learning, not just mindless entertainment. 3 months later, Bradley returned to Rome with a very different purpose. He had spent the intervening time studying Italian history, culture, and language. This time, he came not as a disruptive tourist, but as someone genuinely interested in learning and sharing knowledge. Alessandro was waiting for him at the Trevi Fountain. Now wearing the uniform of a cultural ambassador rather than a simple security guard, the two men had maintained contact through email. And Alessandro had watched Bradley's gradual transformation with approval. "Welcome back to Rome, Mr. Morrison," Alessandro said with a genuine smile. "I hear your content has become quite educational," Bradley nodded, still somewhat embarrassed by his previous behavior but proud of the changes he had made. "Alessandro, I owe you more than an apology. You taught me something I never learned growing up, that real strength comes from lifting others up, not tearing them down." They spent the day together, with Alessandro sharing the deep history of Rome while Bradley filmed respectfully, asking thoughtful questions and encouraging his audience to appreciate rather than exploit the places they visited. The collaboration video they created together became one of the most watched travel education content pieces of the year. It showed Bradley learning to throw coins in the fountain properly, understanding the mythology behind the sculptures, and most importantly, treating every person he met with genuine respect and curiosity. In the months that followed, Alessandro became one of Rome's most requested tour guides. Known for his ability to bring history alive while teaching visitors about respectful tourism, he established a foundation that provided scholarships for young Italians to study history and cultural preservation. Bradley's content evolved completely. He became known for highlighting the stories of remarkable people he met during his travels, from street vendors to museum guards to taxi drivers. His audience, initially disappointed by the lack of pranks, gradually embraced his new approach and grew larger than ever. The incident at the Trevi Fountain became a case study in tourism, schools around the world, demonstrating how cultural conflicts could be resolved through patience, education, and mutual respect, rather than punishment and exclusion. Years later, when asked about that day, Alessandro always emphasized the positive outcome. "That young man taught me something important too," he would say. "He showed me that people can change, that education is more powerful than punishment, and that sometimes the best way to serve your country is to help others understand why it deserves respect." Bradley, now a successful documentary filmmaker focusing on cultural preservation, kept a photo from that day on his desk, not the moment of conflict, But the image of him and Alessandro shaking hands after cleaning the fountain together, it served as a daily reminder that his most viral moment had come not from humiliating others, but from learning humility himself. The Trevi Fountain continued to attract millions of visitors each year. But Alessandro's story had inspired a new generation of travelers who came not just to take photos, but to learn, appreciate, and contribute positively to the places they visited. And sometimes, on quiet mornings before the tourist crowds arrived, Alessandro would stand where the incident had occurred and smile, knowing that what had started as an act of disrespect had, ultimately, created more understanding and connection between cultures than 100 conventional tourism campaigns ever could. The water still flowed, as it had for centuries, but now it carried with it a story of how one moment of patience and dignity had changed lives and inspired millions of others to travel with greater respect and purpose.